Give me one reason why I shouldn't have my boy here pull your head off. How about a magic trick? I'm gonna make this pencil disappear. Ta-da! It's gone. I remember when I saw that for the first time in the theater and everybody freaked out. Okay, it was 2008. Audiences were not as jaded as they are now, and everyone just kind of said the first swear word that came to mind. Well, in the words of the Joker, we made it. Dark Knight is officially my most favorite movie of all time. And I just remember when this movie first came out, the hype surrounding it was ridiculous. Everyone was already excited enough that Christopher Nolan had revitalized the entire franchise with Batman Begins. I mean, quite honestly, we owe Christopher Nolan a lot because the movie about Batman that came out before Batman Begins was Batman and Robin. Actually, now that I think about it, there might have been movies that were made after that, like Batman Forever, Batman Returns, but those were not especially good. But the fact that Christopher Nolan was able to revitalize the entire franchise with Batman Begins, everyone should just buy him some flowers or something because we really do owe him a lot. What's even more impressive about The Dark Knight is that it is technically a sequel. It is technically the second part in a trilogy. Typically, sequels are kind of the middle ground of a story. They don't necessarily drive the plot forward with as much intensity as either the first or the third one does, The Lord of the Rings being one of the best examples, and sometimes they are a bit hit or miss. However, this is an obvious exception. This movie just has everything that you could want out of an action film. It's got an amazing, iconic superhero. It's got an even more amazing, arguably more iconic villain, which we will get to later. It's got an incredible score by Hans Zimmer, which admittedly is a bit repetitive. That's one of the few minor complaints that I have with this movie. And just as a fair warning, I've seen this film so many times for 12 years now that all of the complaints that I have are going to be extremely nitpicky. So if you don't like hearing that kind of criticism, prepare yourself. So you've got the amazing score by Hans Zimmer. Everyone just does an amazing job with the acting in this particular film. You've got amazing cinematography. I understand I'm kind of abusing the word amazing here, but I can't help it. And it seems like almost every single scene is iconic. Almost every single one. Typically, movies go have a few scenes that go from one to the other that build up to an amazing. There I go again with the word amazing. What other adjective should I use? Incredible? Why not? They build up to an incredible climax. So you have maybe scene A, B, and C that builds up to scene D, which is the big event. But it seems like every single scene in The Dark Knight is an A scene. First of all, you've got the opening. You've got that opening bank heist where it slowly zooms in and you hear the Joker's scratching theme. You're already kind of on edge. You're like, what's going on here? Zooms into the building. The window explodes and you see people in clown masks and they're zip-lining across the Gotham skyline, which is actually, fun fact, the Chicago skyline. When you see Christian Bale in his Lamborghini driving away under one of the bridges that supports the train, you can actually make out a license that says Illinois. And then you have, of course, the introduction of the Joker. I believe whatever doesn't kill you simply makes you stranger. And then, as a little added bonus, we get another introduction to him when he walks into where the mob is and he decides to pull his little magic trick. And probably my favorite scene of the entire movie is when they are transporting Harvey Dent off to jail because everyone thinks he's the Batman, and then Joker attacks. I love that scene. I love the fact that Christopher Nolan decided not to use any music there. He just wanted the audience to be completely zeroed in and totally focused on what we were watching. Sometimes movies can benefit from that, like in No Country for Old Men. If there's a lack of music, it makes it more realistic and sometimes even more tense because you're like, wow, this could actually really happen. If a scene is so thoroughly grounded in reality, sometimes music might actually take away from it. And it's unfortunate that sometimes movies have to appease whatever era of film that they are in. For example, in the 90s, pretty much every movie had to have cheesy music that went along with it. Seven by David Fincher, Fargo by the Coen brothers, another masterpiece from them. Both these movies had really cheesy music that, granted, didn't exactly take away from the movie, but I think that if the Coen brothers had made Fargo today, and if David Fincher had made Seven today, they might not have decided to include music in certain key scenes. I saw this movie 3 times in the theaters, and I remember my dad saying that his most favorite scene was the ferry scene, because it not only was an amazing action piece, but it also was an amazing scene of ethics and the human condition. And this probably is the foundational reason why I love this movie so much. It not only is epic in its action, but it's epic in its philosophy. Just because these people are hardened criminals, and just because these people are innocent civilians, doesn't mean that one is necessarily worse than the other. But even if it does mean that, it doesn't mean that when the rubber hits the road, one bad person can't make a good decision and one good person can't make a bad decision. I mean, that guy was ready and willing to blow the criminals up. He said, well, no one wants to get their hands dirty. We've made our choices and they've made theirs. We are fundamentally better than they are, okay? We have the right to take their life. That's basically what he's saying. And thankfully he realizes that just makes me as bad as them. I also love the decision to take the most evil-looking guy with the glass eye or the scarred-over eye to take the remote and throw it into the water. It goes without saying that Heath Ledger is amazing as the Joker. And this is a character that is very difficult to play, or at least it's very difficult to play convincingly. Yes, you can go the route of the comic book Joker, which is actually quite simple to play. All you have to do is be a laughing maniac. But if you want to appear in a Christopher Nolan movie, if you want to appear in a superhero movie that is grounded in reality and you're playing a character like the Joker, you better have some serious psychological backup to whatever type of character that you are choosing to display. Heath Ledger, and accounts vary how long he did this, but Heath Ledger locked himself in a hotel room for either 4 or 6 weeks. Either way, pretty long. And he was trying to delve into why the Joker is the way that he is. If he had been in the original Batman, like Jack Nicholson, he probably would have only had to read a few comic books to sort of get the mannerisms down. And I'm not knocking Jack Nicholson's Joker at all. If any kind of actor wants to do a version of the Joker that is faithful to the comic books, or at least the comic books from the 60s and the 70s when Batman was really at the peak of his popularity, then that's totally fine. If you want to be just a laughing, smiling murderer who has a bunch of toy guns and a bunch of, fun little gizmos at his disposal, then that's great. If it works for that movie and if it works for that actor, then go for it. But I personally appreciate the fact that Heath Ledger was paired up with Christopher Nolan and he was able to give us a more grounded kind of mob boss type Joker. A Joker who doesn't necessarily believe in being crazy, like a clown that you might see at a circus, but he believes that his actions are justified. He believes that he is an agent of chaos. I just love the way he delivers that line when he is confronting Two-Face at the hospital bed. This Joker is grounded in reality because he thinks that he is the one who is in the right. There's an essential scene where he is facing off against Batman in the interrogation room, and he's talking about the police and the DEA and how they are so righteous and they're so full of holier-than-thou attitudes. And he says, they're only as good as the world allows them to be. I'll show you. When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other. And that's a really good point right there. I'm not saying I agree with him necessarily, but what he's saying is that when you try to take some form of justice and some form of order into your own hands, you're not going to pull through with it because you don't have the courage to do so. Righteousness, some sense of justice, it's all a facade. When the chips are down, when you're about to die, people show you who they really are. And I am here as the Joker to tell you who people really are. And people are slaves to chaos. And of course, this is the perfect foil for Batman because Batman stands for everything that the Joker doesn't believe in. Batman stands for order. Batman stands for justice. He stands for poor orphans who have had their parents shot in front of their eyes. Heck, he wears all black and the Joker wears bright and colorful clothing. This is why the Joker is such a legend. And it's also conversely why Batman is such a legend. Because they just play off each other so well. I mean, can you think of any other superhero-villain combination that is such a perfect complement to each other? Superman and Luthor? boring. Spider-Man and Doc Ock, I mean, you arguably have other villains in that Marvel universe that are more of his villain. You know, it's kind of like a dish with a glass of wine. Like, which superhero is the dish and which villain is his glass of wine? Which pairs the best with him? Is it Doc Ock? Is it Green Goblin? Is it Mysterio? You don't really know. But with Batman and the Joker, you can't write a better conflict between two characters. It's also really tragic the way he went. Apparently, he developed or had severe insomnia while he was working on this movie. I actually wouldn't be surprised if he developed it. I wasn't even aware that you can develop insomnia, but I, of course, believe that you can, especially if you're working so hard on a character who is so demented. Now, I don't believe that his character had anything to do with his untimely passing, and I don't think that it was a suicide. But if you are going to develop insomnia over studying some kind of character, I suppose it's going to be the Joker. I've had plenty of experiences where stress and anxiety have kept me up late at night, and I've gone through many a day with 3 or less hours of sleep while still being stressed, and I can't imagine what it must have been like to do it over and over and over again while trying to perform at your best for a Hollywood A-list movie. So my condolences to Heath Ledger's family. And it's another reason why I love Daniel Day-Lewis so much, because during his acceptance speech of winning Best Actor for There Will Be Blood, he actually dedicated his Oscar to Heath Ledger. He himself was really inspired by Heath Ledger, and it just takes a man of great humility to make that kind of announcement when he is in such a public space. The minor criticisms that I have with this movie have a lot to do with some of the very minor characters. Like, for instance, when Harvey Dent is having that press conference and he's talking about how they need to focus on getting the Batman rather than dealing with the Joker. And, you know, the line where he says, "The night is darkest just before the dawn." I mean, if you said that in a real life conference, everyone would break out laughing. But you know what? It's a Christopher Nolan movie. It's okay. He's known to have a few cheesy lines every now and then. We can forgive him. We can let it pass. But when the one cop says, "No more dead cops," and it just kind of pans over to that one stereotypical New Yorker cop, and he says, "He should turn himself in." Like, I could tell that the actor was just kind of waiting for his cue, and he was just like waiting for the camera to pan over to himself. And even with all that clapping, like, there's no way that you could hear him. And another minor criticism I have about this movie, and perhaps I'm playing right into the movie's hand, perhaps I'm playing right to the point of the Joker, but here it goes anyway, is that the Joker says that he doesn't have a plan. Okay, I'm sorry, Joker, but yeah, you do have a plan. How could you have possibly known that during the transport of Harvey Dent, a helicopter would be coming down at that exact moment, and so you could have your goon up on that exact floor so that they could shoot the wire across, the helicopter would run into the wire, and then it would stop the armored car right at that moment? That's just one of the many examples of, like, okay, yeah, you definitely do have a plan. Like, what would have happened if that one cop had decided not to fight you? Like, what if that cop hadn't been such an idiot? Still makes me mad to this day. And not fought you. And how did you overpower him anyway? You had a knife, but he's clearly bigger than you. He's a 20-year man. How did he stop you? How did he gain control of you? And how did you know that you were going to be the only one who was going to survive right after the cell phone goes off in that guy's stomach? You have a plan. Don't deny it. So I think that the Joker did have a plan. But the fact that he said he didn't have a plan was either an extreme form of self-delusion, or it was an extreme form of deluding other people. There's a really cool theory that the Joker is a former soldier who is suffering from PTSD. Because there are a few examples that prove this. For one, he knows the 21-gun salute. He also knows how to handle that kind of gun. So there's evidence right there. He knows how to handle a bazooka. He knows how to handle a machine gun. He knows how to handle a shotgun. And the example that he gives Harvey Dent when he's in the hospital, when he's talking about how people have messed up priorities when it comes to human lives, it seems like a very specific example, where he says, if I tell the press that tomorrow that, like, a gangbanger will get shot, or a truckload of soldiers will get blown up, nobody panics. Because it's all part of the plan. It's like, well, okay, a gangbanger makes sense, but a truckload of soldiers? That is very specific. I think it works really well, and it's kind of fun to just dwell on that, because, you, like I said in my Joker review, you don't want a origin story for a character that is an icon of a certain thing. In this case, the Joker is an icon of chaos. You don't necessarily want an origin story because you just want to view him as an icon. You just want to view him as this deadly force. You don't want to humanize him, otherwise he's not going to be as scary. But to theorize about it just kind of makes it more fun. The Dark Knight is just as much fun as it is today than it was 12 years ago, and I still remember walking to that theater way back in 2008, the good old days, and being so hyped for what I was about to see. The hype and the goosebumps haven't gone away. If you haven't seen this movie yet, I don't know what you're doing with your life, and I am definitely and emphatically giving this one a 10 out of 10. Thank you so much, everybody, for following along with me in my top 10 most favorite movies of all time. Like I said in the beginning, and I want to reiterate, there is a big difference between favorite and best. I realize that The Dark Knight is certainly not the best movie of all time. There are plenty of other movies that have far more artistic merit, are better written, better edited, better acted, all that good stuff. But I can't really make that kind of list because that is just way too much to think about. I haven't seen nearly enough movies to have any kind of authority on that particular list. I haven't even really seen many of the classic movies that are typically on that list. For example, I haven't seen Citizen Kane. Do I want to? Yes, of course. But at the same time, those kinds of lists are reserved for critics, and I am not a professional critic. I'm just a normal guy who loves doing YouTube reviews for all of you guys out there. But in any case, if you followed along, if you really cared about it, or if you didn't care about it at all, even if you're watching, I always appreciate your review. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and I truly appreciate it. Tell me what your most favorite movie of all time is in the comments down below. I would love to hear it. Once again, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next cinematic adventure.